Hello and welcome to day 9 of 30 Days of Spectre. Today we're going to be talking all about the main Bond girl from Spectre, Madeleine Swann, as played by Lea Seydoux, obviously. My name's Tom Sears and I'm joined by my good buddy Chris Wright. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
How are you feeling today, buddy?
I'm not feeling too bad. Looking forward to a bit of Lea Seydoux, a bit of Madeleine Swann.
Aren't we all, eh?
I wish she was my doctor. Dr. Swann.
Yeah, me too.
I'd find something wrong with me every day.
As would I. Good stuff. So we're 9 days into the 30 Days of Spectre. That's just under a third of the way through. We've been going on great guns so far. Very excited. And I feel like, in a sense, it's been like a bit of a therapy session for us, isn't it? In the sense that we can. It's a new Bond film, so there's a million things to talk about, and we've been able to squeeze it out into each other's ear rolls every day, haven't we?
It's definitely needed. If you couldn't do that, what would you do? You'd just be talking to a wall. You'd just be sat in front of a wall. What you'd probably do, it's a bit like Castaway with the basketball that he's got. You'd basically draw this face on the wall, with a big smile and two eyes, and you just sit there staring at the face on the wall, talking to it about Spectre. But that's pretty much what I would have done.
What about all the Bond fans that don't know about JBR yet? That must be what they're doing.
I think they must be, yes. Yeah. And imagine that. There's a lot of wall talking going on out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely indeed. So, happy Monday to all of our listeners. I hope it's a good one for you. Monday's obviously most people's least favourite day of the week, so we hope we can brighten it for you with some lovely Madeleine Swann talk. So where should we begin today, Chris? Where should we get started?
Well, I think a bit of Madeleine Monday. We're going to talk about, why not just start at the start in terms of when we first see her. Now, I think it's quite a cool intro with Madeleine Swann. First of all, you get that sort of sweeping location where she is, which is great. And then Bond goes in to see her in the Hoffler Clinic. Now, what did you think about that first Bond-Swann interaction? What do you think about that scene?
Well, first of all, I that little hint of On Her Majesty's is a really nice little nod. We saw that in the trailer, I believe, and it was like, oh, that's a bit Majesty's-like, isn't it? Yeah. And I think a lot of people, us included, I think, were like, wow, is Majesty's going to be a big theme of this movie kind of thing, which was interesting. But obviously it turned out a little bit different to that. But so it turns out, obviously, that's where Madeleine works. She's Dr. Madeleine Swann, like a psychologist, and it's like a super clinic for, I imagine, the extremely wealthy who will travel up there and sort their old brains out. And I really liked it, man. I like the way. So he goes into her office and sits down, and then there's that sort of quiz that he's supposed to have filled out, and she's sort of going over the answers and stuff. I really like the sort of how they're really standoffish to begin with, or at least she is with him. And there's that little flirty thing where she says, "Oh, the view can be distracting," and he's like, "I hadn't noticed." And she gives him that little sideways look, like she's pretending she's angry, but deep down she loves it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
And I like it. And especially, I suppose, the thing of note from the initial conversation is there's the thing about his parents. My parents died when I was young, and who brought you up? Someone else. And then he kind of launches into kind of what he's got to do. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I had a bit of a feeling of the whole scene in Skyfall, where he's doing the word recognition thing with the Doctor in Skyfall. It had a little bit of that to it. I like the fact that when Swann sort of presses the button and the shutters come down, it reminded me a bit of Thunderball. Blofeld in Thunderball, he's sitting behind sort of a window that's half shutters down, and it looks exactly the same. I think that must have been a definite nod to it, which was quite cool. But I thought it was great. Obviously, she's sort of a psychologist or whatever, probing him. If you look on the sheet, there's a couple of questions like his temperament and stuff like that, and obviously occupation was left blank. And why is it left blank? Or it doesn't look good. And he's outright says, he's not sort of stepping on toes here. He's outright saying, right, I kill people. That's what I do, because he knows that straight away she's going to link that to her dad.
Yeah.
So he mentions that straight away, and you can tell by her face that's what she thinks of pretty much as soon as she says it. But there's some cool things about him drinking too much and exercising only when he needs to and stuff like that. So it's quite cool. I like those little insights that we get.
Yeah. Do you know what I do like? And obviously this doesn't reflect on Daniel Craig himself, but like I always used to love it in the Fleming books when it would get to a point where he'd just be ready to go on his mission. Like, for example, say one of the Jamaican set stories, for example, like Live and Let Die is a prime example, when he swims over to Mr. Big's island. And he starts his little training routine, and he's like running along the sand and swimming a couple of miles a day or whatever it was.
Like Rocky.
Yeah. And I love how, like, Bond isn't the sort of guy who will, check into his local LA Fitness or whatever and start pumping the dumbbells. Do you know what I mean? It's like practical fitness, running and swimming and stuff like that. So the fact that he says, I exercise only when I need to, for me is like a little call to that, which is nice. I couldn't see Bond, down the local 24-hour fitness or whatever it is, on the dumbbells, which is nice.
He does it a bit in Never Say Never Again, doesn't he?
He does.
Not in a gym, but he's got the old chest press on the go before Lippy comes and has a go at him. That's quite a cool scene, that. Yeah. So that's quite good. So it's an interesting thing. So when they turn up, it's very much professional, obviously doctor-patient relationship. And then as soon as she finds out, okay, he knows my dad and he kills people, she thinks, right, he must have done it. And suddenly it turns, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for obvious reasons. And then Bond basically says, no, he was there when it happened, but he didn't kill him. And she's sort of crying because she knows obviously her dad's dead, and she's getting a bit pent up about it, and basically tells Bond to get out, otherwise security is going to kick him out.
Yeah.
Which is obviously what anyone would do, really.
Yeah, I guess so.
They found that out. So,
interesting. And then obviously we get the little kind of scene where Bond goes down to order his vodka martini, and while that's all going on, she's getting sort of accosted by Hinx and his men. And we see that little actually before that, I like that little part actually when he's ordering the drink and he looks up at her office and she points the little shutter remote right at him and looks him right in the eye and shuts the shutter, I suppose. I thought that was a nice little touch. And then obviously the next time we see her being led out by Hinx, and I like the way Hinx kind of just sort of looks at him with a smirk on his face. That was a nice little touch. So there's that's our first meeting of Madeleine Swann. So it's been a brief one. It's been a frosty encounter, and then she's been kidnapped within space of probably 20 minutes. So when she gets the ump with him a bit later, I suppose it's understandable, isn't it? Really.
So after the sort of action scene that we're about to talk about, Swann says to Bond, "Did it ever cross your mind that you might have led them to me?" So do you think that Hinx and Spectre had no idea that she was at the Hoffler Clinic prior to this scene happening, but knew Bond, basically had followed Bond there?
It's an interesting one. I guess so. That's what I always kind of... Well, it's a similar thing to the actual Mr. White thing as well, because obviously the Spectre talking about they've got to go and take out the Pale King and all that kind of stuff right from the beginning of the film. And they mention in the Spectre meeting, they mention where he is in Austria. So they know where Mr. White is, where he's hiding out. And then obviously after the scene with Bond, we see Hinx show up there and find him dead with the crows or whatever they are, eating his eyeballs out and stuff. So I don't know. I guess it could be one of two things, because it could be that it's just like a sort of a finishing the job kind of thing. It's like, let's take out Mr. White and his daughter as well. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple of things around that. I know we're slightly going a little bit off topic, but they've already killed him, even though he's alive. Mr. White mentions he found thallium in his mobile phone, so he says to Bond himself, he's only got a few weeks left. So without a doubt, this guy's going to die. So he's already pretty much dead. But yet they want Sciarra, and obviously after Hinx kills him, Sciarra first, isn't it, and then Guerra, I think his name is, and then obviously Hinx, to take him out. I'm assuming because they think that he'll tell Bond information. That's what I'm guessing.
I guess so.
If Bond's on the trail, sort of thing, maybe. But because Mr. White is already, he's going to die because of them in the next few weeks. But when Hinx turns up to kill him, and then he sees the security camera, he obviously gets that tape, doesn't he? Now, is that security camera, was that purely installed by White as security for when he's in his underground bunker thing? Or do you think Spectre had sort of a hack into that so they could see things as they happen?
Think both. I think Mr. White had that there as his little security thing so he could hide out in his little panic room downstairs. And then also, I guess he must have underestimated the reach of Spectre with their sort of surveillance and their capabilities with that. So I imagine Spectre hacked that, and that's how they got that footage.
In which case, they would have known that Bond was going to the Hoffler Clinic and been prepared to.
Of course, look at you putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
Excellent, yeah, good stuff.
If they had seen that, and if not, then I guess they were just tracking him and followed him there.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Actually, the camera thing. Yeah,
I think so, and I guess because they were so prepared, weren't they?
Yeah,
that I guess that's what it was, maybe. So Swann gets kidnapped and taken in a 4x4 with Hinx and the others, and then Bond basically gets his shades on, comes outside, takes out a couple, and sees them drive off.
Yeah.
And then we sort of, obviously we'll go through the scene in a bit more detail later on, but he then gets in a plane, and so he sort of flying the plane sort of level with them in the car.
Yeah.
Now from Swann's perspective in this bit, there's quite a good scene where basically the guy next to her gets out this sort of needle. And she's like, "Oh, what's that? What are you doing?" Obviously panicking. And basically, just as he's about to inject her, she grabs the needle and shoves it in the guy.
Yeah.
So he sort of gets knocked out. So it's quite nice because you can see that she can handle it. That's the first time that we see that she can handle herself. You know, she's not just a clever lady. She's got a bit of, strength about her.
That is nice. A lot of people have been saying that there's parallels between Madeline and Tracy. And that they're assuming that in the next story it's going to be more of a Majesty's type thing with Bond settling down with her and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I must say, I think that little altercation in the back of the car does support that, because like we've always said, Tracy's a badass because she doesn't sort of just sit there and take it. She's not a damsel. At the end of Majesty's, there she is, breaks the bottle, and she's taking him on and all that kind of stuff. She kills Gunter and all that kind of stuff. She's cool, and I think that's an example of Madeleine being the same. Basically, she's not going to sit there and just let it happen to her. It's like she's going to fight back whenever she can, which is a nice little touch.
Good girl.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice. I suppose we should say, for the love of all things sacred, please don't send us messages going, "You forgot to mention the scene in the plane and the car and the crashing and the rescuing," because we will be talking about things scene by scene throughout the 30 Days of Spectre. So if we've left something out, don't worry, because we will cover it later. There's a slight note of frustration in my voice from the thousands of messages we've had over the last couple of days about, "You forgot to say this. Why on earth didn't you mention that?" It's like, well, it's coming. It's coming eventually. Be patient. Anyway,
it'll be 30 months of Spectre soon.
Yeah, it bloody well will be. But yeah, so after kind of the whole plane sequence and the crash and all that kind of stuff, there's obviously that bit where she's like, "Get away from me," and I'm the best chance of you staying alive and all that kind of stuff. Which is, I like. A lot of people are saying, and this is jumping ahead just a touch, but a lot of people are saying that the whole love story between them felt forced, like it was just kind of shoehorned in and all that kind of stuff. But I don't feel like it's presented as this huge, great love story. I think it's like, obviously she says to him that she loves him, and but he doesn't say it back, and then, there's the climax where essentially they drive off into the sunset and all that kind of stuff. I think that's still open enough to me that I don't see much difference in that. Yeah, he throws his gun in the river, but I don't see that as a hard and fast, like, it definitely means he's quitting and settling down with it at all.
It's definitely not the same as Bond Vesper that we've seen. The Bond Vesper, you see it grow. The Bond Tracy, you see it grow. You see that relationship. You know that by the end of the film, Bond is in love with Tracy or Bond is in love with Vesper.
Yeah.
You don't get that in this film, but that's not to say it could either go two ways. We could then see that happen perhaps in Bond 25, where we actually see, if it depends on if they play it like this, they could kill her off straight away and it's a bit like, oh, okay. But if she stays around in Bond 25, their relationship could grow into something more. And okay, maybe she dies at the end of Bond 25 or the start of Bond 26, or they could just get rid of her and say that's it, sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it. But I don't think it's going to be like, if they kill her off straight away, there's not enough in this film for that relationship to make a comparable difference to Vesper or Tracy, because it's just not at that level, is it?
No, and that's kind of my point. I think a lot of people are saying how, the love story just feels forced and stuff. And she does say she loves him, but at the end of the day, this is James Bond, and he's just rescued her, and she's rescued him, and there's been this thing. Of course, the woman's it's James Bond, for crying out loud. Of course, she fucking loves him, but I don't think making an assumption that he's settling down with her is a bit much, because at the end of the day, why wouldn't you make that assumption about Pussy Galore under the parachute or Honey Rider in the boat? He's ended the film. Essentially, there to me are the same like sunset ending, so to speak, but then you just don't see him in the next film. I think that's my gut feeling tells me I think they will bring her back in the next one, but that's an assumption on both parts. I think I don't buy it. In Casino, Bond says to Vesper, I'm going to quit and find an honest job, whatever that is, and all that kind of stuff. And definitely there's no argument with that. Whereas this is ambiguous enough that I think it could go either way.
Definitely. So would you be happy if, for whatever reason, Madeleine Swann perhaps was killed off, or we don't even see her, but suddenly Camille makes a return and says, "Hello, James."
I love me some Olga so badly. I would definitely enjoy that. I would like to see some Olga again. The likelihood I would think of that happening would be very, very small.
Yeah,
but there you go.
So going back to that bit. So after the plane sort of crash into the jeeps and everything, Bond goes over, shoots a driver. Hinx has gone through the windscreens, that's fine, and he basically helps Swann out. She shoves him away. Get away from me, get away from me. Totally has a go at him. Okay, he's kind of rescued her from this little part, but she says, look, did it ever cross your mind that you were the ones that brought them to me, sort of thing? Yeah. So she's blaming him for, prior to him turning up, her okay, she still had daddy issues, but her life was relatively safe as it was.
Yeah.
Now, shit's going down. And she's obviously blaming him, pushes him away, tells him to get away. And Bond says, well, hang on a minute. I am the only one that could sort of save you, basically. Your life's in danger type thing. So I think that's quite an interesting take, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, obviously, we head to l'Americaine. We find out it's not a person, it's a place.
There's a bit before that, sorry. Bond and Swann go to Q's hotel.
Oh, of course. Yes, they do indeed, yeah.
Because Bond had given Q the ring. So they go up there and Q, all that whole ring thing on the laptop. But you can see Swann's watching them. And as Q's explaining to Bond about all these people, she's basically, a part of her knows what it is because she knows her dad's a part of that. But part of her also, she doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting point, because it's like, why the sudden turn? Why does she go one moment from saying, get out of me, don't go near me, I don't want anything to do with you, to suddenly saying the organization is Spectre, I'm going to help you. Now, I think that reason is because she knows her dad is a part of it, but she doesn't know everything, she doesn't know much about it. And I think the attraction is that here's an opportunity for her to find out more about her dad, about what happened to him, why it happened to him, and a bit more about that organization. So why Q's telling Bond that he doesn't know what it is, she says it's Spectre. I know because my dad worked for them.
Yeah.
Now, and Q basically says to Bond, okay, well, you've got to find l'Americaine. Without him, we're dead in water. And she said, oh, it's not a person, it's a place.
Yeah.
Now she knows she's going to take Bond to l'Americaine because that's a route for her to find out more about her dad. I think that's kind of what I got out of it. What do you think?
Very nice. Yeah, no, I think that sounds about right. Another little nod in that scene. Did you notice the name of Q's hotel?
The Pevsner. Yeah, yes. Tom Pevsner. Yeah, that was really cool, wasn't it?
That made me smile when I heard that. And do you know what? The reason I remember that is I remember being at school when I was probably around the time of GoldenEye, actually 13, 14, 15. I had to write a story at school. And basically cool. I had like a I think what I'd done is, like, how you were allowed to sort of like decorate your exercise books and stuff. Yeah. I had basically a small version of the GoldenEye poster on the front of my English book.
Nice.
And I basically took the names of everybody on that poster and incorporated them into the story. And I
That's
remember I took Tom Pevsner and made him a character in my little story.
Did you? Have you got it? Have you still got it?
Mate, I would love to find that. God knows where that would be these days.
Is it? Yeah. Maybe it's in the attic somewhere. You have to find it if you can.
I would love it. Man, I would adore to find all those old books. Because I remember in my woodwork class, I had this. I had basically a picture I'd cut out of Pierce in his GoldenEye dark green sort of Climax outfit kind of thing, pasted on there, and like the Bond logo and all sorts of nonsense all over the front of it. I would love to find those again. But anyway, I digress. That was why I smiled. It was a double smile because obviously it's an ode to Tom Pevsner.
Yeah.
And then it was also brought back memories of my little school story. But yeah, that's
cool.
A nice little hidden nugget.
Funnily enough, I remember having like a book that I wrote, and I'm sure I called it something like British Secret Service MI6 book or something like this. And I remember writing all these missions. I came up with all these missions that the different agents had been on to various countries and stuff that they did. And I remember writing it. And do you know what? I remember I was in class and whatever they were talking about, I wasn't listening because I was writing my sort of
spy stories,
secret agent book. And then suddenly, like, I think the teacher called me, and I think he was like, "Oh, so what's this?" And I was like, "Nothing." And then he sort of held it up and read the front cover, MI6 agents and all this in front of everyone.
Ah, what a bastard! I was like,
no. But I think he was just doing, I think he found it quite funny. And then, but I don't know where that's gone either. That's
Mate, if we'd have known each other in those days and we'd have been at school together, that would have we would never have got any work done. It would have been spy stuff left, right, and centre.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, without a doubt.
But
we weren't then.
Absolutely. So then I was a bit too keen just now. Obviously, it's at this point they go to l'Américaine. We find them in Tangier. Obviously, Bond's first visit back since Living Daylights.
He looks similar outfit as well, isn't he?
Similar outfit, indeed. He likes a bit of tan. His little tan outfit. He looks a bit different though these days. He looks less Welsh and more English, doesn't he?
He
did in those days. Yeah. But yeah. So how do you feel about this little sequence then, Chris?
I think it's quite an interesting thing. I think it's got some amazing bits within it. I guess from Swann's perspective, again, we get some more backstory about her family history and stuff like that. So they rock up to the room where her mum and dad spent their anniversary, and they used to come back every year. They used to take her with her until I assume the point where they divorced, and then her dad used to come back, but I'm assuming by himself. And I guess that's when he set up the secret room.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming when the divorce happened, maybe, was that because he was involved with Spectre, or was that? It's definitely to do with his work, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whether he was with Spectre at that point, I'm not sure. But I think that was probably when Madeline might have stopped sort of seeing him or whatever. Yeah. So maybe it was just him that used to go. So that's kind of nice. You hear a bit about that. And Bond obviously thinks this is the place where there's information. So he's searching for something. And Madeline's just there having a drink. She's obviously had quite a bit of red wine and is enjoying, well, not enjoying life, but sitting on the floor just drinking a wine while Bond's doing his thing.
Yeah.
I think she's obviously contemplating the fact she's just back there and the memories and stuff. But then there's a great bit when Bond obviously has a drink, and then Madeleine tries to get up saying she's going to bed, and she stumbles into his arms, and they look at each other, and you think, Bond's puckering up, he's ready to give her a good old smooch. And then she basically says, whatever idea you've got, get rid of it.
Do you know what? I really love that bit because it's like in the Bond of old, she would have just, like she says, I'm not going to fall into your arms, doesn't she? She don't think for a moment this is where I fall into your arms. And I thought that was brilliant because in the olden days, that's precisely what would have happened. But she's putting up a fight. She's not giving it up immediately. No. She's still the same as she was in the clinic almost. She's, keeping that boundary between them. And I do like that when she gets into bed, obviously there's the netting over it and she sort of mimes shooting him with a gun as she gets into bed. I really like that as well. That's cool. And then we've got the little sequence where Bond's sitting guard. He's drinking a beer. That's Heineken getting their money's worth.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the little mouse comes along, and that's what leads him into the secret room. I think he's very brave to take a full-on punch against a solid wall like that, and not worry about hitting a plank of wood instead of the gap.
I think he must have, because obviously it must have felt a bit hollow when he tapped it, maybe.
Yeah.
But he just gives it a full-on thump, doesn't he? But I like that bit where so Madeline, I like the bit where she's saying to Bond, when she sort of refuses him, and she said, falling into his arms, solace for her dead daddy. And I just love the way that she says that. I don't know what it is. There's something about the way that she says that is cool. And when she's lying down, it's good. But it's interesting when she's going to bed. She's obviously, I see 2 Jameses. Lucky me. I think she's obviously a bit pissed. But there's that bit where she says, and it's subtitled, to liars and killers everywhere.
Yeah.
And what did you think of that then? Because obviously that's about Bond is a liar and a killer. Her dad was a liar and a killer. To liars and killers everywhere. What did you think about that whole thing? That was quite cool.
That's a kind of I suppose it's like that story she tells of how sort of later on when the man comes to visit her house and all that kind of stuff when she was a kid and all the rest of it shows that she's just had this life of just constant aggravation, all down to what her dad's kind of career choice has been. So I suppose that's just her sort of drifting off and being like, I've got no escape wherever I go, liars and killers everywhere. Yeah, so that's a nice little touch, I guess. Yeah. And
I love that she goes to bed, whatever, she's wearing one thing, but then once Bond breaks through and she wakes up, she's wearing a lovely silk negligee and looking rather tasty, I might add.
Chris, I would just like us all to take a moment here and just what Bond cleavage is something that we like to, or Bond girl cleavage is something that we like to
Bond cleavage.
Celebrate when it happens.
A bit of Danny Boy cleavage.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I think this is one of the finest examples of Bond girl cleavage in the entire series. If you're a Spectre hater, if you're not a fan, at least get on board with that, because that is some absolutely first-class Bond girl cleavage, I think.
It's not bad at all, is it? She likes the slinky little numbers, doesn't she?
She certainly does, yeah.
Yeah, wears them well. So she basically follows Bond into this room. She's obviously never aware, she's never been aware of it. And it's a good bit for her story now, because while Bond's checking out the passports and the computers and looking around, she spots a wall, like a notice board, with loads of photos of her and her dad. So up until that point, even earlier in the scene, like the night before, she said to Bond she's going to mourn her dad in her own time, sort of thing. So she's still not over, she still sort of has a lot of angst against him. Yeah. But yet she gets into this room, sees these photos of her and her dad, and realizes how much he actually cared for her. Which Bond mentioned the night before, but she obviously didn't take on board. So that's quite nice, because you can see, okay, hang on a minute, he is my dad and he cared for me a lot. So that was quite nice, I thought. Yeah,
absolutely.
And then when Bond sort of sets up the computer, turns on the computer and starts trying to figure out what Mr. White was looking for, Swann finds the coordinates on the wall and sort of says, what are these? Gives them to Bond, and then they sort of, that kind of leads them then to the next stage, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a key little scene that of finding it. And obviously we've got that nice little touch with the Vesper tape as well, the Vesper interrogation, cool. Which I think is a key moment, isn't it? Because it's like, for me, like we were saying about how Casino and Quantum, we had rookie Bond learning the ropes and all that kind of stuff. Then we had Skyfall, where he's like a Bond who's kind of past it and over the hill. And this is the first time we see Bond in his prime. I feel like that is a little nod to that happening, in the sense that he picks up the tape. Would the Daniel Bond in Casino have watched it? Would the Daniel Bond in Quantum have watched that tape? I think there'd be a stronger case that he would have in those days. Whereas now we've got this is Bond who's finally learned to compartmentalize his emotions and just get on with the job at hand. And I think that's why when all the stuff about his past and stuff gets dragged up, instead of looking glum and miserable like he did in Skyfall, he's just like, it just water off a duck's back to him in this film, which I think is like ultimately what Connery was and Moore was and everybody else was, So I think the fact that he looks at it, he thinks about it for a second, and then he's like, "Nah, it's nothing." Puts it down. That's the equivalent of "the bitch is dead now." I think that's just a little nod to that, I guess, in this film.
And also, time is the ultimate healer, isn't it? And there has been time now since that's happened, and other stuff has happened, and so it's a nice thing to there's, if he looked at it, that wouldn't do him any good, would it?
No, absolutely not.
He obviously made the right choice at that time. So after that, then they obviously know, they find out there's a spot in the desert where with the coordinates, and they realised Mr. White was getting Bond there so Bond would know where to find Oberhauser, or the head of the organisation. So then the next scene we see is him on the I do like, it's very much Casino with the train going to Montenegro or whatever. I do like the wide shots of these trains sort of snaking on the open landscape. Yeah, so cool.
That shot is incredible. The way it, like you say, snaking through the middle of the desert, and then you just see the sun in the distance just dipping over the horizon. It's like they've just caught that moment of sunset. I think that is one of the most breathtaking shots of the whole scene, the whole movie. Actually, I think I love that. So this kind of like train sequence. Now, one of the other complaints I've seen is, where did Bond get his white jacket from? And where did she get her dress from? Where do you think he got it from, and where do you think she got her dress from?
Well, couldn't they have just got it from anywhere?
Yeah,
like I'm sure they have tailors in Tangier, you know. But at the very start of that train scene, a porter passes Bond, and he says, "Oh, can you press this for me?" Yeah. So he hands him the white jacket. Yeah. Why couldn't he have got it anywhere?
Absolutely. I think they're in the middle of a huge city of Tangier. I'm sure he knows a decent tailor there or whatever. And we've got this journey. Let's go and it's on this posh train. Let's go and get proper.
And Swann did as well, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, why not? What's wrong with that?
Absolutely, yeah, that's my thoughts. But yeah, so before we hit the dinner scene, there's that cool quantum-esque scene, isn't there, where it's like, right, I'm in the little carriage with you. I so desperately want to travel on a train like that with those carriages, like that wooden, styly train. It would be amazing.
It would be.
But yeah, so like the scene at the end of Quantum when he's kind of like giving Camille the pep talk and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like a sort of that sort of version of it where it's like, let me show you how to use this gun and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, I hate guns, and then she shows him she knows exactly what she's doing and all the rest of it. Yeah. I really like that character building. Yeah, she's a tough cookie.
It's definitely the same sort of thing as Camille from Quantum, which I like. I also like the part where when she shows Bond what she's doing, there's a point where she basically is looking at Bond the whole time, flicks out in the magazine and catches it without even looking. Her eyes are on Bond the whole time, and that reminds me very much of Bond in Octopussy, where he's playing Kamal Khan at backgammon, and he shakes the thing and rolls the double sixes, and he doesn't look at the dice, and he just looks at Bond. I love that bit, and this reminded me very much of that.
Favourite Bond moments in that whole series, that is double sixes. Fancy that. And he doesn't look down. Oh my god, that's so fucking cool. I love that sequence. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And something else it reminded me of as well is when she talks about her backstory, where she was like, a man came to kill my father. He didn't know I was upstairs playing with my toys, and he used to keep a gun under the sink next to the bleach. That to me, like, that sounds like a Fleming backstory to a Bond girl to a T. In the same way that like Honey Rider comes along and says about the whole Black Widow spider under the net and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's that kind of background she's had. Do you know what I mean? That feels like that could have come from the pen of Fleming without a doubt to me, that backstory.
Definitely. That's a really good point, actually. It's really Fleming-esque, isn't it? And again, it sort of links in. The main thing with it, I think they were trying to do with Bond and Swann is that, they've both got similar, they can understand each other from where they've both, from their backgrounds, where they've come from, Camille and Bond had similar agendas, both trying to get something through Dominic Green to get something to happen. But with Bond and Swann, it's like Swann kind of would understand what Bond's gone through to get where he is. Bond, now knowing who Swann is, will understand what she's gone through to get where she is. So there is that sort of respect and knowledge of each other, and I think that's what can help gel their sort of potential relationship, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. Both damaged goods with bad histories as far as family is concerned, I suppose. So they're on the same page with that. And then, of course, we have the scene where Bond's waiting for her in the dinner car. He's all suited and booted. He's got my outfit on from the premiere. I think he copied me. I think it's the same one.
He copied me. Mate, he went back and shot that scene after the premiere. No, that's not working out. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. I'm just being silly. And then obviously she walks down the carriage in that rather fetching dress. Nice. And I remember seeing 2 or 3 very lovely ladies in the night of the premiere wearing that very same dress. And to see it in the flesh is quite a special experience. I think she wears that dress like an absolute trooper. I think it's very impressive.
it works wonders, doesn't it? Sort of accentuates all the right lines, I guess. Some might say, and it's quite cool, you know, where she's like, you shouldn't stare, and he's like, well, you shouldn't look like that, which is quite a cool little comeback. But this scene when they're sitting down, aside from switching positions, it's pretty much the same camera angle and type of shots as the Vesper Bond train scene in Casino, isn't it? Obviously, they're sort of on the other side, but in terms of how it's framed, a lot of that conversation is very similar. So inevitably, you're going to get the comparisons. I think the Bond Vesper from Casino, I don't think there's a better piece of dialogue in the whole series, I don't think, than those two in that scene and the two scenes that follow. But but that doesn't detract from this particular scene. I still think it's good. Swann goes back into her doctor mode, doesn't she? She sort of probes Bond a bit, asking him, you know, why do you do what you do? You know, everyone's got a choice. And you get some interesting responses from Bond as well. He's like, well, it was either that or the priesthood. And then she's like, well, you know, what would you do if you stopped? And Bond's sort of thing, well, I don't know. You know, he's obviously never thought about it. You know, his mind's on his career 100%. You know,
that's something else I've read when I've been cruising the forums and stuff about criticisms of this film, is that scene of him saying, when she says, you know, he says, like, I don't stop to think about it. You know, I don't know what I'd do if I stopped, kind of thing, as if that was like an empty piece of dialogue. But I'm like, that fucking says everything about Bond. Do you know what I mean? Like that whole thing of him saying he doesn't stop to think about it because that's just not who he is. He's not the sort of guy who's just going to sit indoors dredging up the past or all that kind of stuff. He's the guy that's going to, at least now in this film, you know, he's going to sort of just press on and do what he does, because at the end of the day, he's a blunt instrument. He's this assassin that just gets the job done. So I thought that was a nice touch, that little chat, actually.
Well, I think that pretty much rings from Casino. That's why he is like that now, because the only time that he's ever decided to go against that, look what happened. You know, the woman he loved, he thought, turned her back on him and died, and like that's going to cement his sort of, you know, his drive to do nothing else. Okay, just stick to the job. Anything outside of that is just bad news. And that's kind of what I think. But yeah, so it's quite a cool little scene, and you know, the way it comes over, she's the one that she wants the dirty martinis, doesn't she? And they get two of those, and it gets a bit sort of friendly. You know, she's a bit happier with him now. I think the fact that they'd gone to l'Americain, I think finding the pictures with her and her dad had helped mellow her a little bit. Now she's a bit like, okay, she's a bit happier in life, knowing that, you know, her dad cared for her. And her and Bond, because he offers her an aperitif, and she's like, oh, I always do naughty things if I have those, sort of thing. I'll be like, right, let's get him in then.
Another round, waiter, immediately.
So that's quite cool. So she's a bit mellower, and they're sort of chatting and getting getting sort of a bit of friendly banter going. Obviously, asking about Bond and stuff, and then they get rudely interrupted, don't they, Tom?
They rudely do. Interrupted. There's the old school Bond thing of somebody attacking through a reflection. We see the approach, which I thought was a lovely little touch.
I like that, and he looks mean in it as well.
Yeah, and I love the way Bond actually does clock that, because I wondered whether that shot was Bond seeing it or whether that was just showing us, the audience. But when Hinx kicks the table and grabs him, Bond's already got his gun out, so it's like his gun's in his hand. So he's totally got that, which I think was nice. But obviously we will talk about this fight at length.
It's hard.
It is. I want to talk about this fight so bad,
but we can't.
We will be talking about that in the Mr. Hinx episode, which will be coming up, obviously. But then, so a key point for Madeline is that at the tail end of that fight, she comes in and saves his life. Bond's absolutely battered and fucked up at the end of it. He's, about to be thrown off the train. He's completely ruined and lifeless almost. She comes in with the gun and kind of saves the day. So that's sort of her key role. So in a sense, so far, Bond has inadvertently led them to her at the clinic to get her kidnapped. He saved her back. They've gone to, she's taken him to l'Americaine, and now she's saved his life. So it is like an even sort of keel in a sense as we kind of go through the story, which I think is a nice little
nice
way of looking at it.
And she does get a bit of a slap off Hinx early on at the start, doesn't she? She goes to help Bond, knocked out sort of briefly, which is pretty bad. But I do like the fact that she rocked up and saved his life, which she definitely did. But then I guess we're going to go into the fight in a bit more detail, but she gets strangled and things aren't good. But after the fight is over, they're basically both like huffing and puffing, sitting down. What should we do now? And next scene, like getting on top of each other, as you would, wouldn't you? Of course you would. You're just taking out this massive dude. Your life is in danger. You almost died. What are you going to do? Let's bloody have sex. Come on, let's go and have some hot, rampant sex on a train. Why not? Why bloody not?
That's what happens when you go on a date with Chris Wright. He takes you out, you almost die, and then he gives you a good ploughing afterwards. Nice. Good stuff.
Sounds like a good date.
But it sounds like a good time for the ladies. But yeah, somewhat like Triple X, isn't it? Oh, Triple X, she's not giving it up. She's sleeping in the next carriage. Jaws comes along. Bond gets rid of Jaws. Right, she's ready now. She's ready to be penetrated.
To
put it romantically. Very nice. So then at the end of the train journey, they're dropped off in the middle of nowhere at that like station in the middle of the desert, I guess, and they just sit there and wait. And then obviously we get the Rolls Royce kind of comes out in the middle of the desert and takes them to Blofeld's hollowed out crater base. And again, there's so many things we are kind of glossing over at this point because we will be dedicating full episodes to them later. So please don't email us saying we've missed it out because it will be coming up. So this is very kind of Dr. No-y, this little sequence, isn't it?
Lots of it. Even on route, when they're basically in the car, she looks to Bond and basically says, "I'm scared, James." And like he puts his hand on top of hers. That's right out of Honey saying to Bond in the lift that she's scared. Or your hands are sweating, I'm glad you're scared too, sort of thing. And then we get loads of Dr. No-isms for the next sort of,
even down to the outfit she's got on is like just like the one Honey Rider wears in Dr. No, like with the sort of the way the neck piece comes up and stuff. But it's like it's very similar, and I love all that stuff.
So they get taken. They get taken inside. They get taken to their room first? She goes to her room. Again, it's like a prison, pretty much. Similar to the Dr. No-esque. Like you said, the dress is already on the bed. How have they? When did they get her measurements, sort of thing? But they must have done. The fact that it fitted well. Again, that kind of links to Dr. No, obviously, when they got their clothes, but also a bit to like Vesper when she sizes Bond up in the dinner jacket. That's quite nice. But there's a picture then of Swann and her dad, the same one that we've seen, but obviously Blofeld had a copy as well. And then they get taken to meet their host. And I, do you know what? I don't want to go on about too much because we're going to discuss it later, but I freaking love the scene when they go in and with the meteorite room. I love it, man. I freaking love that scene so much. It's brilliant.
That to me is like a classic sort of Bond villain introduction speech kind of thing. Everybody loved the whole introduction to Silver, didn't they? Where he comes down and he's just walking along, which was a great scene. But this one I think is equally good. I think I love that little thing. Go ahead, touch it if you want. I like it. It's very nice.
And Madeline's obviously the one that recognised it. Well, obviously it's a meteorite. But then there's a good bit where Blofeld was saying, "Oh, and Dr. Swann, I'm so glad you're here as well. I remember coming to your house when you were a little girl to see your dad." And she's like, "I don't remember that." And he's like, "Well, I do." And like you can tell she's thinking, when was that?
Creepy bastard.
You can tell she's playing back through her memories, trying to think of what stage that was and what happened, and maybe was that how Mr. White was then first taken on board with Spectre, perhaps. But it's a cool scene.
That is nice, very nice. So then, obviously, the kind of the key emotional bit for Madeline is in his kind of Spectre control room, where he's playing her the footage of Bond and Mr. White together. He's about to shoot himself and all that kind of stuff. And Bond's like, look in my eyes, which he's done once before, hasn't he? When did he do that?
He has. In The World Is Not Enough,
He
for
did.
the avalanche jacket. Look into my eyes, look into my eyes, not around the room, look into my eyes.
Very nice. So there is that moment where she does tear her eyes away and she keeps her eyes on Bond. Now, again, I don't feel like the whole romance side of things is as weak as people are making out, in the sense that when you think about what's gone on with these two characters so far, they've both saved each other's life. They've had a good old rampant energetic shag on the train. Very nice setting on the train, by the way, I will add. And then there's this moment here, which is a very deep emotional thing. And he shows that he cares by, like, look in my eyes, and they have that moment where it's like just the two of them against the rest of the world almost. And I think that's where a huge amount of the bonding, so to speak, happens.
Very nice. Well, he's basically saved her from seeing her dad die, and she obviously appreciates that. When she's looking at Bond, she knows what's about to happen. When she's looking at Bond and you hear the gun go off and she reacts, and they're looking at each other, and Bond's basically, his eyes are saying, I'm really sorry that happened, but and you can tell she's sort of almost saying thank you for not letting me watch that type of thing. So that definitely happens. I think if you throw any two people in that sort of situation where they've been in terms of what they've had to go through, if they're not love, there's at least going to be sort of a lust going on, because you can't not save each other's life, and get it on without at least something being there. Can you? So absolutely. I think in terms of the whole love thing, it is on a short time scale. So I do understand that you're not going to get your montage like you do in Majesties. You're not going to get your Bond's sort of.
They haven't got time to go pony trekking.
That's it.
They haven't got time to sit on the edge of a waterfall this time around.
No, they haven't.
It's an action-based relationship.
Yeah, without a doubt. But I think that's a great scene that shows they obviously connect a bit more. And then the next one, probably even more so.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a banger as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the kind of the next bit is obviously the torture sequence, which again we'll talk about at length in a later episode. But again, that's another sort of point that's sort of bringing them close together. And there is that point, obviously, she's the one that saves him after the second time he's been drilled. He goes over, gives her the watch, and she's the one that chucks the watch. And so it's ultimately her that gives Blofeld the scar. That's Madeleine's doing.
That's a good point.
So there's that whole thing, and there's that moment, isn't it? After he jumps out of the chair, he stops and just caresses her face and looks right into her eyes, and then they bolt it out the door, which I thought was kind of interesting.
They do that quite a lot, actually. In fact, there's a bit after the train fight when they're just about to get it on, and they rush in, they go through the door, they're taking each other's clothes off, and then they stop and just look into each other's eyes. He does a bit of the hair behind the ear, and then they sort of go for it again. And I think that happens, a few times. But with this torture scene, it is interesting because Swann obviously has to watch him being tortured. That's you can tell she's pained by having to watch him. Yeah. There's a bit where just after the first one, after the first driller's gone in, she's like, "Why are you doing this?" And obviously Blofeld then explains the whole story. And then as a second one comes in, she can't take it anymore. She rushes over to Bond. She thinks he might not remember her. Now, when she says she loves him, she could definitely mean it, and that could definitely be, okay, this is love. But for those people that think, no, that's too soon, it's not going to happen, she could be saying it as she thinks that this line has the greatest chance of making him come to than any other line.
Yeah,
she could say, "James, are you awake? James, hello. Are you there? I love you." The power of that could be enough to make him come out of his.
I would wager that if she'd have said, "James, I'm pregnant," that would have probably done the job.
Why did she not say that? That would have been amazing. Yeah, James.
There we go. His eyes immediately. Oh shit! What have I done?
That's brilliant.
We've never seen Bond taking responsibility for his dastardly ways so far.
He'd wake up and go, but I was double jacketed. What went wrong?
double bagged. How did it possibly get through? Good Lord! But there we go. It's obviously they break out from the base and escape. The next time we see Madeline is obviously when they get into the Hildebrand safe house, which was really nice. Again, after I saw it the fourth time, it says Hildebrand Prints and Rarities. I thought
Prints
it's
and Rarities,
but it's Prints.
No,
and
but
Rarities.
that's cool though. Hildebrand Rarities is in there somewhere.
Absolutely,
that's great.
That is very, very nice. Yeah, it did bring a massive smile on my face when I saw that.
Great stuff.
So then we have this little exchange with them where they're about to go off and sort out the CNS building, and she says, I can't live this type of life. This is you. I can't live like this kind of thing. And she goes off on her own. As she sort of walks, you hear she's walking along on her own. You hear this sort of sound behind her, and she stops and looks behind her. So that's obviously where she gets sort of snagged for later.
You think that's definitely her having heard someone or something and looking back, and not her recontemplating her decision and looking back?
I'm pretty sure you hear like a footstep, like a sneaky footstep. So that's what I got from it. Yeah.
I mean, I assumed she was looking back because obviously we find out then she's captured the next one. But I wasn't sure if it was her thinking of Bond or not. But yeah. So, that's quite a cool bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we don't really see her until the very end of the film when, all the climax is happening. We've got MI6 all kind of rigged up to detonate. She's all kind of tied up at the top of the building and all that kind of business. So how do you feel about sort of this little sequence here?
Well, it's interesting. Like, it almost reminds me a bit of, I try not to sound too harsh, but a bit like 60s Batman, where there's a TV show, he rocks in, the girl's tied up and a giant Venus flytrap's going to eat her, and he has to kapow, bush, and smash his way through everyone to save her. And it's a little bit like that. I'm trying not to sound too bad by saying that, but it is a little bit like that.
No, I get it.
Like, there are a couple of instances. There's the scene when they break out of Blofeld's lair. I'm going to mention in that particular scene, but there's something I wanted Swann to do in that scene which didn't happen. The scene when what's the part after that where they in the safe house, that's all fine, and then outside when she tells Bond she's going, do you think she's just like, right, do you think that's her proving that she doesn't love Bond enough, or that because she's obviously the one. Bond does look a bit gutted, but straight away the resolve comes in. He's like, right, it's part of the job, forget about it. But what do you think Swann was thinking on that time? Do you think this is just too much, can't take it? I think
what it is at the end of the day, she spent her entire life hiding, and she killed her first person when she was a child playing with her toys to save her dad, and she'd thought she'd hidden from it and sort of could get on with her life. He suddenly rocks up, everything changes, and she's brought back into the thick of it. Now they're going back into the field of battle, and she's just like, do you know what, I've tried all my life to escape this, I can't go back into it again. And that's why she decides to run. But obviously that's not going to last for long, is it?
No, that's it. So they get so this part where she's trapped, obviously we don't see her until the point where Bond opens the door, goes in, she's got all these sort of wires connected to it.
It is funny though, that is very 60s Batman, isn't it?
Yeah, because they normally have people like tied up with all these bits of string all over them or whatever, don't they? So, it did remind me a bit of that. But he obviously cuts her free. They see that the time is about to go, and he's like, picks her up and says, do you trust me? And she's like, something like, do I have a choice, or something like that, isn't it? And then they jump down to the massive sort of safety net, and just as the building explodes, and then they sort of manage to get out on the speedboat, literally just as it's crumbling around them. And then basically Bond asks Swann to take over the boat while he's taking some shots at Blofeld's helicopter. So, she can pilot a boat as well, which is pretty cool. And then after the helicopter's sort of in trouble and goes down, sort of Bond hops off, legs it up the stairs. She sort of takes time just to tie the boat to the side or whatever she's doing, have a cup of tea or something like that. And then she obviously goes up, and then by the time she gets to the bridge, helicopter's down, Blofeld's out, Bond's chatting to Blofeld. M's on one side, she's on the other, and she's basically just watching Bond to see what he does.
Yeah.
And then Bond, decides that he's not going to kill Blofeld. He's got something better to do. Walks towards Swann, chucks a gun away. She sort of walks towards him, and it is very much the sort of almost like the end of a I don't know what sort of film. It's kind of a fairy tale ending, isn't it? The prince and the princess hug each other, kiss, and then walk off hand in hand, and it's very much sort of that sort of fairy tale sort of ending. So what did you think on that? Do you think that was too fairy tale, or do you think that worked okay?
I mean, at the end of the day, Bond always ends up with the girl at the end. Like, obviously, apart from at the end of Casino and Skyfall and Majesties, but
and Quantum.
And Quantum, yeah, good point. But yeah, for me, that's not sort of any cheesier than Pussy Galore Under the Parachute, Honey Rider in the Boat, or any of those, Like I was saying, I want to see an ending where Bond ends up in a massive orange dinghy in the middle of the ocean with his missus, and that's the end of the film. I'd love to see that again, awesome. Man. That would make me really happy. But yeah, to me, that's just the equivalent of that. I don't think this is any different to those, really.
And then basically at the very end, we see her with Bond in the DB5. They share a quick smile together, drive off, and then the music plays. So what were your feelings about the end from her point of view? So do you think, in terms of their relationship, or at the end, what do you think?
Well, again, I think the thought that Bond has quit the service for her is a bit of a jump in my book. I mean, that might be the case. That might be what they intended, but it certainly wasn't. Like, it was ambiguous enough that it's certainly not laid out in black and white that that's what he's doing. Q says, I thought you'd left, but that could mean anything. That could mean, I thought you'd left to go on holiday. You've just finished this huge thing. You need some leave, It could be anything. I don't think it's definitely black and white. It might be, but I don't think it's black and white that they are going off into the sunset together and he's quit the service. Now, there is that thing I think you brought up about how has she given him an ultimatum saying it's me or the service, and he's giving that up. But don't forget, she did give him that ultimatum. She was essentially walking away from that life, and then what happens? She gets kidnapped and tied up at the top of MI6. He comes and saves her. So I'm sure her feelings about that have changed somewhat. If she leaves him again, who knows who's going to walk around the corner and stick a sack on her head and steal her away, Yeah.
Well, she's probably counting on her fingers, right? So you saved me, I saved you. You saved me, I saved you, and then you saved me. Bugger, you're one up on me. I'll just go with you then. But I think from that whole idea that the ambiguity about it, 100% that was meant to be that way, because I think what they were trying to do is try and pull, like the early Bonds. Oh yeah, pretend Bond's dead in the pre-titles. Let's pull the wool over people's eyes for a little bit. I think this is the exact same thing. Let's give them enough to think maybe this could be the last Bond with Daniel Craig. Maybe he's gone away. Maybe this is the end. And I think because so many people have taken that to heart, that is why a lot of the negative reviews have come out. I think at least some of them can be apportioned to that, because they think, well, how can that sort of be, sort of thing. I don't know. I think that might be why, but I'm sure it was definitely, they wanted it to be like that.
I think you would have made it abundantly clear. People are taking the fact that he throws the gun in the river as the sign that he's quit the service. Again, to me, it doesn't mean that. It's, again, that might be what they intend, but to me, what's on screen doesn't say that in black and white. At the end of the day, he's got a gun in his hand that he's run out of bullets. What's he going to do with it? Just, what I mean? Just going to chuck it in the fucking river, I don't believe it's a black and white thing like that. No. Bond ends up with the girl at the end of pretty much all the movies. If she doesn't show up in the next film, I wouldn't be surprised, My hunch says she will, but how is that any different than Pussy Galore or Domino or whoever he ends up with in a boat at the end?
Okay, so Bond 25 speculation with Swann. If she does turn up, what do you think will happen to her character?
Well,
or should we save that for another episode?
No, I've got quite a passionate theory about the next two movies.
Wow,
which they need their own episode, so we'll
save that for next time.
Which is somewhat like a Batman 60s episode, isn't it?
Wow. It is.
Find out next week what happens
same
with
time,
Tom's theory.
Same time. Yeah.
But,
that's great. I love that.
But but we've been chinwagging for nearly an hour now, so we should wrap up today's episode. So before we go, make sure you come and join us on Facebook if you haven't already. Put James Bond Radio into the search box. Come and follow us on Twitter, which is at James Bond Radio, and of course, come and visit jamesbondradio.com, where you can leave us a voicemail. You can join in the conversations in the comments area of any of our episode posts or any of the blogs. Good old Jack Lugo has been posting some stuff and some guest posts over there. He's been managing all that for us. And then obviously Linda Zoo over in Station C does her This Week in James Bond segments every now and then. So there's that to look forward to as well over on the website. And also, if you wouldn't mind coming to subscribe to our YouTube channel, again, just put James Bond Radio into the search on YouTube and you'll find us. And last but not least, if you could come to our iTunes page and leave us a lovely glowing 5-star review, because that helps us rank higher in iTunes and attract more listeners and all that kind of stuff, which is delightful. And then just before we go, another shout out to good old Brett Spencer from Down Under. He's the fella that's made all the really cool graphics that accompany each episode of the 30 Days of Spectre. So that's his handiwork. So if you need a graphic designer, give Brett a shout at brett@brettspencer.com, and he'll sort you out. So that's all good. And he's bloody good at what he does too. So until tomorrow morning, I've been Tom Sears.
I've been Chris Wright.
And James Bond Radio will return tomorrow with more 30 Days of Spectre.
And it's going to be a good one.
Absolutely.
See you tomorrow, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.